In the little village of Oakhaven, nestled between two green hills and a sparkling river, lived a man named Magnus. Oakhaven was a quiet place where chickens pecked in dusty yards, and neighbors knew each other by name. The houses were made of wood and stone, with colorful flowers growing in window boxes. Everyone in the village knew Magnus. He was not just tall, but very, very strong. So strong, in fact, that everyone called him the strongest man in the village. But when people thought of Magnus, they didn't think of a scary giant. They thought of a big, warm smile and hands that were always ready to help. Magnus lived in a small cottage at the edge of the woods. A cottage he had built himself with logs he carried on his own shoulders. Magnus was a sight to behold. He had shoulders as wide as a barn door and arms as thick as young tree trunks. When he walked through the village market, he towered over everyone else, like a friendly lighthouse guiding ships. His hair was the color of straw, and his eyes were as blue as the summer sky. Little children would often stop and stare, their mouths open in wonder. But Magnus would just wink and give them a gentle nod, and they would giggle and run back to their mothers. He never used his size to make anyone feel small. Instead, he seemed to use it to make everyone else feel safe and looked after, like having a big sturdy oak tree right in the middle of their village. His daily life was full of small feats of strength that left people amazed. When the baker's cart got stuck in the mud after a heavy rain, Magnus didn't even break a sweat. He simply walked over, put his shoulder to the back of the cart, and pushed it onto the dry road, as if it were a child's toy. The baker, Mr. Gable, would just shake his head and offer Magnus a fresh loaf of bread, which Magnus always accepted with a grateful smile. He could chop enough firewood in one morning to last a family all winter. He could carry 2 buckets of water from the well in each hand, and not spill a single drop, even all the way up the hill to old Mrs. Gable's house. The people of Oakhaven never feared Magnus. They admired him. They knew his strength was a gift to their community, not a threat. When he spoke, his voice was deep and calm, like the rumbling of a distant, friendly thunder. He was a simple man who enjoyed simple things, the taste of fresh honey, the sound of children laughing, and the feeling of a job well done. He worked as the village blacksmith, and the sound of his hammer ringing against the anvil was a steady, comforting rhythm in Oakhaven. It was the sound of something strong being made, not something being broken. His strength was a part of the village, as much as the river or the hills. Magnus believed strength was for building, not for breaking. He showed this not with words, but with his actions every single day. If a fence blew down in a storm, Magnus would be the first one there, setting the post deep into the earth and making it stronger than before. He never asked for payment, though people always found ways to thank him with pies or knitted scarves or jars of jam. He simply saw a need and filled it, his big hands working carefully and precisely. He could mend a broken roof, fix a wobbly bridge, and even hoist a fallen bell back into the church tower all by himself, a task that would normally take 10 men. His workshop was a place of wonder for the village children. They would peek through the wide doorway, watching him work the hot metal. Sparks would fly as he hammered a glowing horseshoe into shape. Magnus never shooed them away. He would smile and explain what he was doing in simple terms they could understand. He showed them how heat and pressure could turn a hard, stubborn piece of iron into something useful and beautiful. He was teaching them a lesson without them even realizing it. He was showing them that real power was about creating things that helped people, not about showing off or being loud and boastful. One spring, the river rose higher than anyone had ever seen it. It threatened to flood the lower fields where many families grew their food for the year. Panic began to spread through the village. But Magnus remained calm. He gathered a group of villagers and organized them. He waded into the rushing water, carrying heavy sandbags as if they were pillows. He showed everyone where to place them to build a strong wall against the rising tide. He worked all through the night, his huge frame a symbol of hope against the dark, churning water. His steady presence and tireless effort calmed everyone's fears. By morning, the river began to recede. The wall of sandbags had held and the fields were safe. The villagers were exhausted but relieved. They looked at Magnus, covered in mud and weary from his work, and they saw a true hero. He hadn't fought a monster or a dragon. He had fought a flood, a force of nature, with his bare hands and his unwavering spirit. He had used his incredible strength not to conquer, but to protect. He had saved their harvest and their homes. Magnus just smiled, happy to see the sun rising over a safe and sound Oakhaven. That was all the reward he ever needed. Magnus's strength was most visible when someone was in need of protection. He was like a gentle guardian for the entire village. One afternoon, a pack of wild dogs, made bold by hunger, wandered down from the hills. They began to snarl and snap at the villagers in the market square, causing people to scream and run for cover. The dogs cornered little Lily, the baker's daughter, who had dropped her doll and was too scared to move. Just as one of the dogs lunged, Magnus stepped in between them. He didn't shout or strike the animals. He simply stood there, tall and unmovable, and let out a low, deep rumble from his chest. The lead dog skidded to a halt, whining. It looked up at the giant man who stood like a mountain before it. Magnus didn't look angry. He just looked very, very big and very, very calm. He slowly knelt down and held out his hand, not in a threatening way, but in a gesture of peace. The dogs, sensing no threat from this powerful being, tucked their tails between their legs and trotted away, back towards the woods. Magnus then turned to little Lily, picked up her doll, dusted it off, and handed it back to her with a reassuring smile. He had used his presence, not his fists, to solve a dangerous problem. He was also a protector of feelings. He noticed when people were sad or being treated unkindly. One day, a new family moved to the village. Their son Thomas was very shy and spoke with a stutter. Some of the other children laughed at him when he tried to speak. Magnus saw this happen. He walked over, not to the children who were teasing, but to Thomas. He sat down on a log, which creaked under his weight, and began to talk to the boy. He spoke slowly and calmly, asking Thomas about his old home. Magnus listened patiently, never rushing him, nodding as Thomas carefully formed his words. Soon, the other children saw the strongest man in the village treating Thomas with respect and kindness. They grew quiet and watched. Magnus didn't scold them. He simply set a better example. He asked Thomas if he wanted to help him carry some wood to the workshop. Thomas's eyes lit up and he nodded eagerly. As they walked away together, the other children felt a little ashamed. They had used their words to hurt someone, while Magnus, the strongest of them all, had used his actions to heal. From that day on, no one made fun of Thomas's stutter again. Magnus had protected his heart. Magnus didn't just help with his muscles, he taught with his heart. He believed that every child in Oakhaven should understand what true strength meant. He would often let them help with small tasks in his smithy. He would show them how to hold a tool properly, or how to polish a finished piece of metal until it shone. He would tell them, strength isn't just for lifting heavy things, it's for lifting up people. It's for being gentle when you could be rough. It's for being patient when you want to rush. The children listened to his words, because they saw him live by them every single day. He taught them that bravery wasn't about looking for fights. It was about standing up for what is right, even when it's scary. He told them stories, not of great warriors, but of ordinary people who showed courage. He told them about the farmer who shared his last seeds with a neighbor, and the little girl who told the truth even when she was afraid of getting in trouble. He explained that helping someone who has fallen, sharing your bread with someone who is hungry, or speaking a kind word to someone who is sad, these were all acts of the greatest strength. It was a different kind of strength, one you couldn't see, but you could feel in your heart. The children of Oakhaven grew up learning a valuable lesson from Magnus. They saw that his muscles could move boulders, but it was his kindness that moved the entire village. They learned that being strong wasn't about how much you could lift, but how much you could give. They saw him comfort the crying, help the struggling, and protect the vulnerable. He was their hero, not because he was big and powerful, but because he was good and kind. He was teaching them to be heroes in their own small ways, in their own homes, and with their own friends. And so, in the quiet village of Oakhaven, the strongest man was also the kindest. Magnus showed everyone that real strength is not found in the size of your arms, but in the size of your heart. It is the strength to be gentle, the courage to be compassionate, and the will to help others without asking for anything in return. His legacy was not in the things he had lifted or built with his hands. It was in the lessons he had built in the hearts of the people, especially the children, who would carry his gentle strength into the future. making the whole world a little bit stronger and a lot kinder.